Welcome, everybody. I'm here today with Patrick King. He has been your instructor for the online riding workshop, and today Patrick's going to teach a new exercise that's going to help you to get started with this if you're just wanting something really basic to start playing with. And this is actually the building block for really all of the in-hand work and the positions that he's been teaching. And we're going to go through some of the questions that have been coming in through the workshop. So welcome, Patrick.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks so much. This is going to be fun.
Yes, absolutely. So I wanted to start with, and there might be still some people that are kind of tuning into this that aren't familiar with your work. So just give us a little bit of background on why is in-hand work such a big piece of what you do with your horses and your students?
The in-hand work, the way that I like to think about it, I talk a lot about the difference between our groundwork and our in-hand work. Our groundwork being sort of the foundational work that gets the horse receptive to learning, that gets him under basic control, even at the very beginning stages of that work. And then our in-hand work, when we go a little bit farther, really helps to get his body in a better place for the work that we want him to do. The in-hand work, I think of it so much like yoga for us or Pilates. We can isolate areas where the horse might be holding tension in his body and help him to release those. We can prepare him for more advanced work like collection, engagement, changing his balance, things like that. There's even some instances where we can change their movement patterns if they've developed a movement pattern based on stiffness or braciness from maybe past injuries or past training that wasn't quite suitable for the biomechanics of the horse. Our in-hand work can really help us to reset that and put our horse on kind of back at a clean slate for movement that way. And more importantly to me is that it really sets the stage for relaxation and understanding of the rider's aids. We can, again, going back to the engagement and collection, we can help the horse to find those places. We can help the horse to use his body in a better way, engaging the proper muscles that we want him to use when we're riding without the bulk or the influence of the rider's weight on top potentially hindering that learning process.
Yeah. And I know I've found a lot of benefits to my own, not just handling skills, but my riding from doing the in-hand work in recognizing, for one, recognizing the way that the horse is moving and getting a better feel for noticing tension. And that has definitely transferred to my riding. What different levels of riders do you find that you introduce this work to?
Mm. Well, and going back to what you're talking there, the benefit to the rider is tremendous in that sense that the rider can learn to feel what proper movement looks like and then begins to feel like through the reins or the halter, the cavesson, whatever they happen to be working with. So there's a huge benefit not only to the horse, but also to the rider for, like you're saying, developing that feel, developing that understanding, and sometimes also I think developing the empathy, right, for their
Mm-hmm.
horse when they see that their horse isn't just saying no, I don't want to do something. The horse is saying, look, I'm stuck in my body, or I need time to process, and that carries over really well to the riding also. And for those reasons, I have riders at all levels that we introduce to the in-hand work. We've got riders that are just learning about horsemanship, that maybe even haven't had many rides, but they've got a little bit of horse experience and they're trying to learn and read more. All the way up through, Grand Prix riders we're teaching this work to, and it's completely changing their relationship with their horses as well.
Well, let's get into the exercise. So when I was thinking about doing this live session, I wanted to have something to introduce to people that they could really just get out and kind of play with it. And that piece that you teach of just getting the relaxation has been, and getting the relaxation like through the jaw and stretching forward with the neck has been huge for so many of the students that have gone through our first small round of the course. So could you kind of help teach that here and help people know how to get started with that little exercise with their horse at home?
Yeah. So we can we can certainly talk about that and touch on what I think are some of the the most important parts of that. When we're talking about helping our horses to telescope forward and downward with their neck, that's very different than just putting the head down, right? A horse can lower the head, and that's something that we see taught in a lot of horsemanship programs, just putting the head down to bridle, putting the head down to put the halter on, putting the head down just for the sake of putting the head down. But that's very different than stretching. And so I find that riders oftentimes run into this challenge of trying to pull the horse's head downward. And then they're not necessarily going to always get that telescoping forward outward with their horse. Some horses will go into that anyway, because when the horse learns to feel that, it feels better to their body. So some of them will just naturally go there. But for the most part, that's not going to encourage the horse if they haven't discovered that place yet. So what we want to think about in that forward, downward, that telescoping forward position that we're asking for of our horse, it's more, if we think about the way let me do this in the right angle, the way that the horse's cervical vertebra, the spine in the neck, are aligned. If you've got your horse's head here, his spine kind of arcs out and downward in his neck, connecting into his shoulder. What we're trying to do in this position is not just lower the head, but we're trying to actually extend, straightening, and aligning those vertebrae in the neck. So that's where there's a big difference in how we apply that and the results that we get from the horse. The horse is just putting the head down. He's not necessarily extending the vertebrae in the neck there. So we're not going to get the reaching and the stretching through the nuchal ligament, through the muscles in the top line, and then releasing, say, his lower back and his hips. And that's the big piece of this. You know, we get asked all the time, why do we do this? And the idea is that this action, this telescoping forward action, actually gives us better access to the haunches on the other side of our horse, allowing them, enabling them to stride farther underneath themselves when they move, helping them then to rebalance. So I would often say that the length of stride is in direct relation to the active length of the neck. If we start to compress the neck, the stride is apt to shorten. It's going to shorten. When we allow, or when we achieve that extension of the neck, the stride itself extends also. So that's where we talk about the active extension of the neck. But so going more into kind of the nitty-gritty of how we're going to get into that, it's so much a place of helping the horse to discover the extension of the telescoping of the neck rather than making it happen. For the same reason, if we were in a yoga class and I'm as generally inflexible as I am, if the yoga instructor were standing behind me pushing my body, it's not going to help me find a stretch. It might put me into a position, but if my body's not unlocking and kind of letting go, releasing tension in order to come into that position, there's definitely not going to be any benefit. In fact, there might be a hindrance or a problem caused by that forcefulness happening there. So the discovering part can be challenging for some riders, some people, because we are definitely better at being a human doing than a human being, right? So we want to make it happen. We're type A. We want, this is what's on the checklist. This is what's on my agenda today. This is what I'm going to make happen. But super important that we allow the horse to find this. And generally, when we're starting off in the halter or the cavesson, the way that I'll do this is laterally more than downward, more than forward. So we would say that the lateral flexion or the lateral releasing gives us a longitudinal releasing in the horse's spine. So if we think about our hand, right, try to angle this so the camera can see better. If we think about our hand, this could be similar to our horse's neck. My wrist being similar to the atlanto-occipital joint, the occipital pole. When we talk about pole flexion, this is where that kind of comes in. And the horse has got a lot of freedom, like us, in the up and down of the wrist, but very little, if we try to hold that still, holding the neck still, very little in the actual lateral rotation. So when we think about the idea of the lateral release to the longitudinal release, we want to think about how that's shaping up in our horse's body, specifically in the occipital pole. If we just try to draw the horse's head and neck downward, he can still brace in his occiput that way and lower the neck. But that occiput, and we talk about this all the time, the atlanto-occipital joint, where the neck and the skull come together, that's kind of the doorway to the rest of the spine, okay? If that's braced, and you see horses brace there all the time. You see a lot of horses even with inflammation in the muscles from chronic bracing. If that's braced, the rest of the body's going to be braced. I don't care what position you put it in, there's going to be a brace. If you get that to release and soften, then the rest of the spine can soften. And I think of it sometimes like some of the exercises that Wendy Murdoch does with the riders, softening the jaw, sticking out their tongue, little things like that to help soften their jaw, their TMJ, the base of their neck, because of the influence that it has on a human the whole way down through the spine. It's the same thing with the horse. So rather than downward, we want to think a little bit laterally when we ask our horse for this work. And it's minuscule, right? Because we're looking at 1/2 inch to 1 inch shy of center. So that's that, on me. With our horse, 1/2 inch to 1 inch is the maximum amount of lateral movement that they have in that occipital pole. Anything more than that, and they can brace in the pole and move the rest of their neck, right, to accommodate that. So it's a very minuscule movement. I talk all the time about, if we're thinking of center, it's eyelashes left, eyelashes right, but not more than that. Trying to isolate just the head where it meets the neck at the occipital pole. And so when we're asking the horse to come in or to find, when we're trying to help the horse find this forward reaching through the neck, I would have my hand, say, on the nose band of the halter, or on the ring of the cavesson, or even on the bit rings if I'm working from the front in the bridle. And I just want to think a little left, right, left, right, left, right. And sometimes it's a little tough to teach this even in person. So hopefully it's going to make sense here through the video. But it's so much about, say, come to the left and wait for the horse to release into that. Come to the right and wait for the horse to release into that. And that lateral releasing is going to bring us that longitudinal releasing, that lengthening through the body. And it almost sounds too easy, it sounds too simple. But when we can help the horse to relax and to unlock in the occipital pole, the neck is going to naturally reach out there and stretch. And it works. It's almost like magic, it works in that as soon as they unlock and they release there, they start to stretch forward immediately. So this is, again, going into that idea that we're helping the horse find it. We're not putting the horse into it, right? Mm-hmm. We're not doing this to the horse. We're not making this happen. We're setting up the conditions that allow the relaxation that elicit the stretch in that case. So, we want to think not a downward pull on the nose, not even so much a forward downward pull on the nose. It's a release laterally, a little left, a little right, until the horse finds it. And how long it takes the horse to find that longitudinal extension is dependent on, the inherent stress or tension that he carries, the squirrels that might be running around at that moment. So if the horse is distracted, if he's, there's lots of factors that go into that influence the horse's focus and relaxation. So this is where we get back to those 4 key pieces that we talk about all the time: slower, softer, wait, and breathe. Because even when we come to the side, we think slow, tiny, just a little, and wait for that horse to release into that. It's like if we were going to go dancing, right? If I reach out for your hand to dance, I'm not going to snatch your hand and pull you out there. I mean, I could, but the dance is probably not going to improve much from there, right? Mm-hmm. So it's similar with our horse. We want to think, if I make this offer, will they kind of melt into the hand? Will they melt into that offer? And that's when we're going to get the quality of work. That's when the longitudinal release is going to actually have some meaning to the horse, instead of just reaching down and pulling his nose.
Yeah. It's what I love about the in-hand work and the way that you teach it is, on the surface, it seems like a simple movement, but there's many layers to, I think, not only the quality of the movement and the softness of the movement, but in how we start understanding how to ask for it.
Mm, yeah, yeah. And it is so much, it's the ask, right? It's the setting up the conditions so the horse is able, right? It's not the demand, it's not the making the thing happen, right? The human doing. It's on our checklist and we're going to make that thing happen.
Yeah, I like that. The human doing versus the human being.
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. I have a friend who's I think he was an Air Force surgeon, and he's as much with Eastern as Western medicine. So I get lots of really neat lines and insights from him. But he said, that's our problem. We're doings, not beings.
Yeah, yeah, I love
We
that.
need to get back to being that other way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I'd like to do now is go on to some of the questions that have come in through the workshop. And I would encourage you to go out and try that. Just try this little exercise with your horse. Am I correct, Patrick, in saying they can start to kind of play with this anywhere in the stall, in the barn aisle? It doesn't.
Absolutely, yeah. That's because there's really no movement necessary from the horse as far as his feet goes. This can be done anywhere, and it's something that I always check in with every time I pick up on the lead rope, or every time if I'm working with a horse with a student, if I pick up and touch on the ring of the bit, I want to feel, do we get that release in there, or do we get a brace? So yeah, you can do this in the stall. You could do this as you go to catch your horse from the field, even, if he's out in the paddock and you're putting the halter on, you can just hang out there for a moment and see if he'll find that release into that. And then for some horses, that's even a really great moment to do that. When you go out and catch them, start this, set the stage, start the communication with your horse in a way saying, hey, can you relax into this? Can you willingly, softly come with me, kind of accepting throughout the entirety of their body. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, one of the questions that has come in is, doing this in handwork, how long should the sessions be in this work?
And that's a really common question for us. And to me, it depends on what we're trying to get done. It depends on where the horse is in that present stage, and the focus for that. There are some horses, like we talked about, finding that release when we first put the halter on. That might be that session that day for that horse.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to depend. To give you, I guess, maybe a baseline idea, when I teach the in-hand work as a class, as a group class, the group class itself is 3 hours long. And that's way longer than you'll ever work with that horse in that in-hand work, for the most part, forever after that. And oftentimes we rotate through horses so that riders get a chance to work with multiple horses, to feel the changes in multiple horses, that sort of thing. On average, when I work with a horse doing this at the beginning of a ride, it might be 2 minutes, right? If the horse checks out and he releases, then he's ready to ride. If he shows me that there's tension in the body, then we're going to work longer until we can help him to release that tension. I don't think there's necessarily a cap on the amount of time you need to spend doing this, or that you can spend doing this, because our in-hand work right now, what we're talking about is the basics, and kind of the gateway to a lot of the higher level movements. So eventually you're talking about things like piaffe, passage, flying changes in the long range. You're talking about some of the higher level work, your levade, your ballotade, your capriole, things like that. And it takes the horse definitely some muscular preparation and some warm up to get ready for those things. So that you'd be talking about a little bit longer sessions when you're starting with that. But for starting this in hand work, I generally recommend to my students anywhere between 5 and 20 minutes to start with, because I think if we get the idea that we have to go for longer than that, then the human doing again, we start really drilling the horse, and we can overdo or overcook one in that work. And then we start to lose the value in it, right? The horse starts to not get so much benefit from it. The same reason there would be the cap maybe on a yoga class. We're not going to go to yoga and sit there for 3 hours and do that work, because we'd basically be useless after that, because we'd be wearing our body out. Now, in this slow work, the way that we're presenting it, you're not going to wear your horse out physically. But if your horse is working through a lot of stress, a lot of tension, if you're finding a lot of trouble spots, you can do so much that mentally the horse just gets exhausted, or we could say fed up, right? Because they have to work through so much internally, so much mentally. And so we want to be careful of that, But generally, as a general answer, the long answer to your short question, anywhere between 5 and 20 minutes for most riders, for most horses, is a great way to start seeing some progress.
Yeah. And it reminded me of another question that I had seen a few times coming in when you were talking about some of the more high school movements for the riders that they're interested in trail riding on the weekends. Or I know we have some folks that have been watching that have a gaited horse and, their aspirations aren't for doing higher level dressage. Where does the in-hand work fit for them?
Yeah, and we have a lot of trail riders. We have a lot of gaited horse riders. We have, this in-hand work, I teach it to every discipline. So we've got our dressage riders, we've got mounted shooters, we've got, the weekend warrior trail riders, we've got every discipline basically within that. And where the benefit comes in is that we're unlocking the horse's body and helping him to relax. So he's using himself more in alignment with the biomechanical truths of those bodies. So, we're talking a little bit about posture and things like that. It's very much that way with us, right? If you're walking around and you're in bad posture, that's going to wear on your joints. It's going to wear on your body. It's going to cause problems through your systems, right? Your muscular system, your skeletal system, all of those things. And that's going to have an effect. If we think about things like our trail horses, right? We want our horses to, for the most part, be relaxed and willing and accepting of new surroundings and things like that as they go on the trail. Well, we know that when any body is tense, they're a little more on alert, right? They're a little sooner to jump and spook maybe at things. So if we can help the horse even just to come into basic relaxation in our in-hand work, we're setting him up to be a lot more confident on the trail because his body's going to be in a more receptive place. We get to talking about the dominant states of the nervous system, the sympathetic dominant state and the parasympathetic dominant state. If the horse is tense in the body, if there's tightness or tension, he's going to be operating more from that sympathetic dominant state, which is going to have him more ready for flight, right? More ready for the reaction of things rather than the quiet acceptance of things. So to me, this in-hand work getting started is just as important for our trail horses. And maybe we could even argue more so, right? So that they are receptive and quiet to that situation that we put them in. It's not to say that 5 minutes of in-hand work is going to overpower a lack of training or a lack of confidence, but it's going to set the stage so that the horse is more available in that sense. So yeah, to me, this work is important for every discipline, for every horse, for every rider.
Yeah.
But I might be a little biased.
Well, I know you mentioned about the effect that the posture has on movement. And we talked about it through the workshop too, but the effect that the posture and the movement have on the mental state of the horse. And there's some really good research that's been done on this in people, actually looking at different postures and how that affects neurotransmitters. And I think specifically cortisol is usually the one that's looked at, the stress hormone or one of the stress hormones. And I think, it's the body, the functions of the body are so similar that it's true for the horses as well. It absolutely changes their mindset, the way that they carry themselves and the way that they stand and move.
Absolutely. So when we start talking about, horsemanship as an art, it's interesting when you look back through time, when you look classically at the work that a lot of the old classical masters did, it's very much this similar work. So looking back over time, you've got the art side of things, and now you've got the science side of things that are actually backing up the art, which I think is fascinating. We're in a really awesome time where we can prove and disprove through science a lot of this work that we think about as the classical work. There's a reason why it survived. There's a reason why it was so prevalent and so sought after, right? Because it's real. Maybe they didn't have the science to explain it at those times. But now that we do, it's interesting that we're proving its value.
Yeah, excellent point. Well, when we were talking specifically in part two, when you were explaining the difference between anatomy and conformation, and how we can affect the horse's conformation, we had some questions come in there about what kind of a time frame can you expect to really see differences. And I know this is hugely variable, but maybe if you can just share a few examples of horses that you've worked with that have seen a change.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're talking about seeing a change, I recommend to all of my students, take a picture of your horse, take a profile, a side body shot of your horse before you start this work. I think it's super interesting to see the changes over time as the body learns to release and learns to engage and starts to connect and build certain muscles where it allows others to soften. I've seen a lot of changes in a horse over a 6-month period, year-long period, 2-year period, when riders take those photos and start comparing. If we think about the top line development on a horse, right? If we think about the basic top line development, we're looking at about 18 months, say from 0 to finished, right? To really educate the horse's body, when we're talking about strength building, it takes about 18 months to build up the muscles so they're solid enough to really carry the rider successfully. So take that in mind from scratch, right? From 0, the horse has not had any work. Now let's think if the horse has got tension that he's been carrying around, or poor movement patterns based on that tension, or based on poor training in the past, based on lack of confidence, poor posture or conformation, like we talk about. You're starting potentially there, not at 0, but at maybe -1, right? So to develop that horse to really be the solid, most athletic version of himself could be longer than that 18-month period that we're talking about there, to really build that solid top line on the horse, that development. And of course, it's a constant development process. It's just like us going to the gym, right? Just because you go to work out at the gym for 1.5 years doesn't mean you're set for life, right? It's about constant maintenance and constant attention to all the details within that. But I've seen some pretty dramatic changes in horses from one session to the next, even as their body learns to let down. You see places where inflammation starts immediately to dissipate because now the blood's flowing, because they're not holding a brace in that spot. I've got a horse last spring, I think it was, maybe. I was working with one horse out in the Midwestern US. The horse was, I believe she was an off-the-track thoroughbred. And this poor mare was lame in every leg, basically. They couldn't decide where she was most lame because she was so stiff and lame everywhere. Through the in-hand work, turned out she was not actually lame. She was just so body sore, so tight. And looking at her low back in front of her pelvis, a lot of expression of the lumbar spine there, the vertebrae in there, to look at the way she moved with her hind legs, a lot of hamstring kind of expression in there, not so much the gluteal muscles. So she was kind of stabbing at the ground rather than pushing, carrying, driving. The neck completely set on upside down. And this horse, within 2 sessions, looked completely different. The expression of, we might call the jumper's bump, right? Or the hunter's bump in front of the lumbar, in front of the pelvis, that started to fill in as her back muscles started to increase in their blood flow. So one session to the next, we started to really see a huge difference. The hamstring softened and her rump started filling in a little bit as the blood was flowing more appropriately. Now, granted, to me, that was, I think, the most extreme case I've seen of big physical changes in a horse, that from one day to the next, she visibly looked different. If you'd have gone into the paddock to catch the horse we had worked with yesterday, you would have walked right past this horse. She was that different in look. Didn't change color, didn't change markings, anything like that. But the entire body softened. She went from having that kind of stag neck, or the U neck that we talk about, to she just found that release, and the way that her neck was set into her shoulder completely changed as the tension went away.
Interesting. Now, for for a horse that's coming back from a more acute injury, is this kind of work appropriate?
I would say it is appropriate, and I've worked with a lot of veterinarians that do agree with that because of the slowness of the work. Now, when we're talking about kind of the higher level, increasing gait work and that sort of thing, I would stay clear of that until the vet tells otherwise. But for the most part, this slow work, particularly in our position one work, that's great for any horse at any stage. And when they're coming off of an injury, it's a great way to slowly reintegrate proper movement within the body and proper blood flow and things like that. So this kind of in hand work, I work a lot with this with riders whose horses are laid up and stall bound because of an injury, and so they're coming out, they're able to work, but they're working for, there was one I was working the other day, came back off a pretty serious ligament injury, and she's hand walking the horse for 10 minutes. Otherwise, the horse is bound in the stall. This work is really helpful in just unlocking the body. And even if we think about kind of the energy, the anxiety that a horse will build up being stall bound, this is great work to help them release that anxiety and relax, to help them release that tension, so that the work that we do with them as rehabilitative work is smoother and safer, really, for the horse. So they don't have necessarily those explosive moments where they're out of control because they're out of touch with their body.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Well, we've had a lot of people that ask questions around that, coming back from an injury, or even coming back from a long layup because of winter or because of weather where the horse hasn't been working, and then starting to bring them back in.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. It's a great way to do that. And this is something also that through the winter, because you can do it in a stall basically, or your barn aisle, this is something you can do even when you can't ride, that can help to keep your horse maybe not as fit as if you're riding, you're actively working him, but it's going to help keep the body more receptive to the work that you're doing. So you'll find that coming back in the spring, coming back to good riding weather, he's going to fit up a lot sooner because of this work through the winter. Even if you just do it, a time or two a week, even, it's going to help him to be so much more receptive and ready for that workload when better riding weather comes in.
Yeah, awesome. Well, for those of you that have enjoyed the workshop and want to continue with this work and really start to go through it progressively with your own horse, Developing Balance in Hand, the full course with Patrick, is going to be opening up today. But I have one more question, and this is honestly just a kind of a personal question that I thought would be interesting. What is a horse that stands out to you that you've worked with that was just a really interesting case? Maybe related to the in-hand work, might have been really earlier in your career?
Oh gosh. To me, the challenging horses are always the ones that stand out. The big transformation horses stand out, and I guess two of them that I'll say relate to the in-hand work are the mare that I was just talking about, that completely changed from one session to the next. That one I think for me really opened my eyes to how powerful this can be to changing a horse's body by changing their mental connection to their body, if we want to say it that way.
Yeah.
So she's one that definitely sticks out to me. And another one who happened to also be an off-the-track thoroughbred, a gelding in Pennsylvania. He was really terribly on the forehand and just stiff, and as a lot of those horses can be. But such an awesome personality, really wanted to go to work. So we started schooling a little bit the in-hand work over 3 days. We started schooling the in-hand work. And to help him come back up off the forehand and to help him engage his haunches a little more, I started schooling a little bit of Piaffe. Not schooling Piaffe like to say, okay, now we're going to do Piaffe, but just giving him the idea, right? Getting the body moving, thinking about getting him to rock back and that sort of thing. And he really started picking up on the idea of, can you lift your leg? Can you rock back on your haunches? In the first session. By session number 3, we were actually getting legitimate Piaffe steps. And I don't think we had more, all totaled in the 3 sessions. I didn't have 45 minutes worth of work in that. And this horse started picking up on legitimate Piaffe half steps not only on the ground, but he carried it over under saddle. And it completely changed the way that he moved. He was no longer so heavy on the forehand. Of course, he didn't have the strength yet to continue that more collected carriage for any length of time. But he went there and he felt so good. You could feel that this horse felt better about himself in that posture, you know? So, and to me, I think about these two horses all the time. So we're looking at them on the physical and the emotional side of things, right? As that mare started to unlock and relax, she was physically in a better place. And this gelding, he was emotionally and physically in a better place. He was, you could feel that he was just, I want to say proud of himself, you know. I don't want to do too much of that, you know, transfer of our emotions into them sort of stuff, but you could tell this horse had definitely a greater sense of pride. That's what I want to say. A greater sense of pride in his own body,
Yeah.
because we helped him to find a different way of using himself. It was fascinating stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm excited to be bringing more of that to a larger audience now through doing this online course. So this has been a bit of a process getting it out, as it always is. It's taken us a few times of, doing the filming to get all of the different pieces that we need, working with different horses, and then us on the back end here kind of doing the editing and getting everything ready to be presented. So what was it, I'm just curious, that kind of attracted you to agree to do this online course?
It took a little while.
It took a while. And it's funny because I tell people that all the time. I'm like, yeah, it took Callie a while to convince me to do this, and and I know you guys have seen going through this process, that there's so much of this that it's hard to teach in person. It's hard to teach when I'm sitting there holding your hand and walking you through the process. So my big challenge mentally, right, my mental hurdle for this was, man, if it's hard to teach this in person, how are we going to teach this through the computer? How are we going to teach this online this way? And I will say it's the work that you've done with Wendy Murdoch, with her courses, knowing her for as long as I have. I think we've been friends for, 15 years now. Knowing her and how she teaches, I know that if you're getting that work through your in-hand or through your online courses, I thought, well, maybe there's something to this. Maybe there's a way we can actually get this to work. But I will say, if it wasn't for your poking and prodding, I don't think I would have done it.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was frustrating at times, trying to get me nailed down for this. But,
Well, the fun part has been seeing, since we have created the course and the test group has gone through, that first small beta group going through, and seeing their results, and the fact that yes, you were able to teach it through the online course, and they're taking the work and doing the work and getting the results with their horses.
Absolutely, and it's been great to see the video submissions that we've had. The video submissions that we've had of people going through and doing this work, and the way that you helped to break it down into the segments. You've got such a great way of seeing that and knowing how people are going to be able to receive that. That to me was a huge piece of the success for this, for everybody that's going through this, because you were able to break that down and put it more into a linear step. It's definitely not a paint by number idea, but you were able to set it up, I felt, in a really great way that it was understandable, it was actionable, and folks can see where they're going with it. So kudos to you for translating all of my muffled stuff as I'm teaching and jumping from one place to the next, and here's step one, and here's step X, and then let's go back to step 2 here, and squirrel.
Well, thank you. It's the part that I really enjoy, and I think those that have watched some of my little videos and stuff know that I tend to have a pretty analytical mind, and I think that's what helps me with kind of saying, what's step 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, I think you did a great job with that. And it's opened my eyes to how teachable a lot of this stuff really is, even at a distance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
thank you for that, honestly.
Awesome.
Well, that's the perfect lead in to explain a little bit what the different lessons in the course, what each one has in it, and what you can expect as you're going through. So in the first one, we started with really the building blocks, and that's where Patrick teaches the why this is important first, understanding more about anatomy and about the horse's body to be able to start to recognize some of these different postures as we go through the exercises. So that's lesson one, is going through and getting those building block pieces. And then in the second lesson, you introduce those basic two positions, position one and position two. And those are really essential pieces for doing a lot of the more advanced work, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I would go so far as to say if you don't have the building blocks, you're not going to have the rest of it. And if you don't have position one and position two, you're certainly not going to be able to do any of the other work, at least not the quality that we're looking for, and not without resistance or tension or frustration in the horse's body. The building blocks, to me, we have to set that stage with that. And that's the building blocks in there, that finding the extension of the top line, that longitudinal release through the spine, and then going into position one and two. Those, I feel, tend to take the longest time for the horse and rider to learn, but they're absolutely the most essential pieces. Those are the basic foundation for the language of our in-hand work. All of our in-hand work, I don't care how far you take it, all of our in-hand work is going to is a product of how well we've done those first two positions and the ingredients ahead of or before that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we set up the progression of these, it was really strategic. So I wanted to, in the first part, give people that the understanding of why this is important, and a little bit more of that anatomy piece, and then playing with those basic two positions in lesson two. And then in lesson three is where you started to bring in teaching more of the rider position and starting to kind of troubleshoot the positions too. Because I think once you've had the opportunity to play with it a little bit and just get your feet wet, then those corrections that you made and that the examples that you gave, like some of the dance examples that I found really helpful, they made so much more sense once folks have been able to play around with it and start to get an understanding of the positions.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then from there, we start moving into the more advanced work, and and really understanding and seeing and feeling how the exercises like shoulders in and counter shoulders in and renvers and travers and half pass are much more accessible than I think many people think, and also how they really do play a role in strengthening and suppling the horse. They're not just a position to kind of do to check a box, like you said earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a movement for the sake of the movement. It's exactly what you said. It's a movement or a series of movements that we would do for how it enables us to access the horse's body, emotionally, physically, posturally, that help to prepare him for so many things to come. And it is, it's, we could call it basic, right? Because when it comes to postural adjustment for your horse, those first couple positions and the first few movements, like you mentioned, the shoulders in, the counter shoulders in, the travers, renvers, half pass, those things in small bites. You can do those with any horse at any stage. And I would go so far as to say the sooner we start working on those when the horse is working under saddle, the sooner, the quicker, the better we're going to be changing his posture to enable him to carry the rider in a more athletic position, enabling him to carry himself in a better posture, which long term for the strength of the horse and the soundness of the horse is very beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So in lesson 5, in the final lesson in the course, then we start to bring all these pieces together and doing the patterns. And I think they're really fun, and it's also nice to have that pattern to just give some purpose and direction. It's something that you can kind of focus on doing and improving, and as you continue to work through the same pattern, you start to see a lot of progress, and it becomes smoother and easier to go through it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's like you say, it's that something to check in to see, where am I? How am I actually doing? It's one thing to get your horse eventually working into, say, the half pass, right? It's another thing to say, okay, I'm going to go from this cone or from this letter to this other one, and when I get to this other one, I'm going to ask for the half pass. Well, that's a whole different idea. As far as the preparation that's going to lead up to that. So we have to be sure in that case that the horse is capable and that we are capable of asking for specific things in specific places. And at the same time, not overdo it, not drill on it, because then we lose the value of the relaxation and the postural adjustment. So yeah, the patterns definitely make it fun. They help us as milestones, right? Not just check boxes, but actual milestones to say, my horse and I actually do have this, and we have it so well, we can do it exactly where and when we want to. Yeah.
Yeah. And when we filmed the course, you worked with a variety of different horses, so we have Bigfoot, who was a little bit more experienced in this work. And then we also have Nico and Dulce, who were a little bit more green, especially Nico being green and being new. So the benefit is when you're going through the course and watching, it's not just, a quick demo with a horse that goes right into it. It makes it look easy. You get to kind of see the process, see the mistakes, and see Patrick work through helping the horse find the right position and find the relaxation in it.
Yeah, and seeing those changes, and as a rider, feeling those changes, I think is really helpful for getting our confidence in knowing that we are actually asking in the right way. We just need to wait for the horse to come through and find those places and that sort of thing. And that's why oftentimes in my clinics, when we do the group classes, we'll switch horses. We'll get a couple things working, and then I'll say, okay, everybody swap horses. Find a horse you don't know. Find a horse from a handler you don't know, if it's group class, that sort of thing. To really feel the variety of things that come up, because we talk about position 1, position 2, we talk about the lateral work, and there's basically a set number of exercises, a set number of movements that we're asking the horse to do. But when you change horses, there's a limitless amount of responses that you're going to get in an answer to the request of, say, position 1. There's so many changes and so many variables that come in that as we change horses. So I recommend to folks all the time, as soon as you can, play with these ideas with multiple horses. Have a party where all your friends get together and you all play with this in hand work, and you go through position 1 and 2 and switch horses and that sort of thing. Having that larger base of horses to work with really helps the handler to become confident in knowing that they are asking for the right thing, they are asking in the right way. They simply need to wait for the horse to come more available to those positions and for the work that we're asking them to do.
Yeah, excellent advice. And it's always so much more fun to work on something like this when you can get some other people to work on it with you, which is, why going through the workshop, I kept encouraging you to invite a friend in to watch these with you, so that you have someone to discuss it with, and that you can watch each other at the barn and have that feedback. And even if you don't have that, that's part of the reason why we do the video coaching as part of the course. So when you join the course and you go through and you start doing this work with your own horse, you can send in 2 different videos for Patrick to review. And having that, that feedback is really helpful. And there's always things that can be noticed on video. And then, I'm sure, as you already did for the current students that set in their videos, you can just kind of help set someone on the right track from sometimes just a small tweak that you see.
Yeah, and oftentimes that small tweak is really what makes the biggest difference. It can be as much as changing the joint you use in your finger, right? So that you're not braced when you're holding a contact with the horse, or taking a half of a step in one direction or another, or changing. I find myself coaching riders all the time on videos and in person, changing your energy, changing your intention. Are we coming forward? Are we coming backward? Are we sending the horse away? Are we drawing the horse into? Those little things, if we're not keenly aware of them, can really have a big impact, or will have a big impact on the work that we're doing with our horse. And I find a lot of times too, students will video themselves and they'll look back at the video before they send it. I have lots of students that do that, you know, outside of this course even, that'll send me a message and say, hey, I videoed myself. I watched it. I'll check back in with you in a week because I know what I need to fix, you know.
Yeah.
So it's very much this kind of self-assessment ability, right? Also, as folks now in this course have the ability to look back on the exercises that we're presenting and compare that to the work that they're doing. So a lot of our students that are really keen on noticing the difference, and really picking up on some of those subtleties, they'll coach they'll video themselves, and then they'll watch that next to the exercise being done, say in this course, and they'll have a pretty good idea of what they need to work on. And so then, you know, they can make, I think, a lot more progress that way. And I've always been a fan of videoing your own lessons, videoing your own sessions, so that you can look back and tweak and, you know, coach and adjust as you go.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Awesome. So if you would like to join us in Developing Balance in Hand, you'll get all of the lessons. You'll get the video coaching with Patrick. I also created a workbook so that you can have a reference, like a text reference, and places to make some notes, kind of fill in some questions. It just helps with that learning to not only have just the video that you're watching, but just another way to be interacting with the material. We've got some nice diagrams to just help understand really, you know, what the body position is, what your handler position is for the different exercises that Patrick will be teaching through the course. So thank you for being on here and teaching us, sharing your knowledge, and answering our questions from the workshop, Patrick.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for, you know, sticking with convincing me to do this. It's going to be a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing the videos that come in from students. I look forward to hearing how this program helps them and their horses, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. It was well worth the convincing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's just a shame we didn't have any fun while we were filming, you know.
Yeah, it was pretty boring. We had a lot of fun, if you did pick up on that. Wait till the blooper reel comes out. That's going to be extra bonus.
I'm half afraid to see the blooper reel. I won't lie.
All right.
Thank you for watching, for tuning in. You can get all of the details and join us in the course with the link down below. If you're here watching us early and you know that you want to jump in on the course, we're doing something special for everyone that joins in the first 2 days. Patrick is going to be leading a live class where he'll be answering all of your questions as you're doing this work with your horse during this live class. And there's also going to be the opportunity to send in videos to have a video hot seat on the call where he'll be taking a look and going over your video, giving you feedback live. And this will be in addition to the video coaching that's already included for everyone that joins the course. So this live class will also be recorded, so even if the time doesn't work for you, you can still send in a question and you can watch the recording to really get the benefit of it. Or you can go back and even just review the recording later on. So again, if you know that you want to jump in, this class is going to be for everyone that joins in the first 2 days of the course. Just hit the link below, learn more, and we would love to have you join us.
Hi, I'm Danny Henry, and this is my mare Gracie. I enjoy dressage work, and Gracie enjoys that, but she also enjoys trail riding, so we do some of both. And I'm always trying to find new ways to connect with her and have a good partnership and encourage her to use herself and work better with her body. A difference I noticed very quickly was that she tends to stretch more, which is one of the things. She'll stretch down, but never wanted to do the telescoping and stretching out. She's certainly much better at doing that, and I found that that carries over while I'm riding, so which is super great that she can do that under saddle. I've done groundwork with my horse, and she will follow me around and do things like that, but I think the in-hand work is even another level beyond that. It kind of gets you in sync with your horse. It also helps your horse learn to relax, and all of that carries through into your riding. And the course is very, very step by step. I mean, you right from the beginning, he lays everything out very clearly. The horses do progress.
My name is Krista Page. I'm from Heights, Maryland, and my horse is Grace. She's a 10-year-old Dutch warmblood that's been in and out of training now for some time for health issues. Since I've been working on Patrick's exercises, she's been calmer. She's been more willing. I love Patrick's course entirely, but my favorite part was learning the positions. He made it so understandable. I've heard these things like probably a zillion times in the past, but for some reason, the way he explains it and demonstrates it, it just immediately clicked. I would tell anyone that was thinking about signing up for the Patrick King horse that he's an amazing clinician. I've had some real breakthroughs after doing his course with my horse Grace. But yeah, she's doing amazing now. And since I've completed his course and moving on, she's really come a long way.